The night the baby wouldn't stop crying was the night Lucas knew something was terribly wrong. His wife, Julia, was nowhere to be found. The house smelled faintly of alcohol, and their two older kids, Mateus and Isabella, sat on the living room rug in silence, drawing with crayons they hadn't put down in hours. Lucas had seen signs before. The slurred words, the forgotten appointments, the erratic mood swings. But that night, standing in the dim hallway holding their youngest, he felt the full weight of it hit him. Julia had vanished again, likely on a binge, and he had no idea when she'd come back or in what state. He put the baby down and called her phone. No answer. Again, no answer. It wasn't the first time she disappeared, but it was the first time the fear felt like it had claws. In the morning, she returned. Disheveled, eyes bloodshot, clutching a cheap bottle half empty. Lucas didn't speak. The kids looked at her with a mixture of hope and confusion, too young to understand why their mother always seemed to drift away. He made breakfast, dressed the children, and walked Mateus and Isabella to school. The baby stayed on his chest and a carrier, small arms wrapped around his shirt. Neighbors noticed. Some whispered. Others offered fake smiles. Lucas kept walking. He didn't sleep that night. He waited until Julia passed out on the couch, then sat at the kitchen table staring at a blank notepad. What do you do when the person you love becomes a danger to the ones you love most? Lucas had a full-time job. He had deadlines, clients, bills, but none of that mattered now. His priority had shifted completely. Protect the kids, even if it meant standing alone. And so the next morning, he began keeping a journal. He wrote down every moment. When she left, when she came back, what she said, how the children reacted. Not out of vengeance, but out of desperation. He needed proof. He needed a way to fight back, not with anger, but with truth. What he didn't know yet was how far this road would take him, and how strong he'd have to become just to survive. Days blurred into weeks. Julia would disappear for hours, sometimes days, and return without explanation. Lucas no longer asked where she had been. The lies were worse than the silence. He kept the house running. He packed lunches, braided Isabella's hair, helped Mateus with homework, and fed the baby every 3 hours. He learned to function on little sleep and constant worry. One evening, Julia came home stumbling, her voice loud and words slurred. The children froze at the sound of the door. Lucas gently guided them to their room and closed the door behind them. "Where are the kids?" she asked, looking around like a stranger in her own house. "Why are you always making me the villain?" Lucas didn't answer. He stood firm, calm, but inside his heart ached. He wanted the woman he married back, but she was gone, buried under addiction and denial. That night, after she passed out, Lucas found a small bag of pills in her coat pocket. He didn't touch them. He just stared, hands shaking. The journal he kept grew thicker. He documented everything. At work, his performance suffered. He had to explain absences, missed deadlines. Some co-workers were supportive, others skeptical, but Lucas didn't care about judgments. His only focus was survival. One day, Isabella asked quietly at the breakfast table, "Why is mommy always sad?" Lucas swallowed hard and answered, "Because sometimes grown-ups carry pain they don't know how to let go of." He hugged his daughter tighter that morning. He knew the time was coming when he'd have to make a decision no father ever wanted to make, and when that moment arrived, it would change everything. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Lucas had just arrived home from work when a neighbor knocked on the door, pale and shaken. "I saw Julia down the street," she said. "She was stumbling into traffic. I called an ambulance." Lucas grabbed his keys without a word and drove straight to the hospital. There, in a dimly lit hallway, he found Julia restrained to a gurney, mumbling incoherently. A nurse approached. "Sir, she's intoxicated. This isn't the first time, is it?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, while the kids slept at Helena's house, Lucas sat on the bathroom floor and cried for the first time in months. Not out of weakness, but because he realized something had shifted inside him. The fear was no longer about Julia. It was about what would happen to the children if he didn't act. The next morning, Lucas met with a lawyer. He brought the journals, photos, medical records, school notes from teachers who had seen the children fall asleep in class or come to school in wrinkled clothes. The lawyer listened silently, then nodded. "It's going to be hard, but you're doing the right thing. Filing for temporary custody wasn't easy. There were questions, hearings, doubts, but Lucas remained calm, honest, consistent. He didn't speak with anger. He spoke with love for the children, for their safety, for their future. When the order came granting him temporary custody, Lucas felt the weight shift. For the first time, he could breathe without guilt. Julia showed up 2 weeks later, demanding to see the kids. Lucas stood at the door holding the court papers. "You can see them, but only under supervision." Her face twisted with rage, then broke into tears. He didn't hate her, he pitied her, and deep down, he still hoped she would get help. But now his mission was clear, to give his children the life they deserved, even if he had to do it alone. Lucas learned to juggle everything. He woke up at 5 a.m., made breakfast, packed lunches, dressed 3 kids, and still made it to work. In the evenings, he cooked, helped with homework, bathed them, and tucked them into bed with bedtime stories, never letting them feel the weight he carried. Julia began sending messages at night. Some were apologies, others were full of blame. She said he had stolen her children, that he was turning them against her. Lucas didn't reply. He saved every message. His lawyer advised him to stay silent and stay focused. The children slowly began to smile more. Isabella danced in the living room again. Mateus laughed out loud during cartoons. The baby, now crawling, followed Lucas from room to room like a shadow. There was peace, even if fragile. Lucas started therapy. He needed someone to hear him, someone to help him process everything he had bottled up. The therapist didn't give him answers but gave him space, and that was enough. At the next hearing, Julia showed up clean. At least physically. She had entered a treatment program and claimed to be committed to recovery. The judge acknowledged the effort, but maintained the custody with Lucas, allowing Julia only supervised visits. Lucas was torn. He wanted the kids to know their mother, but he also feared another collapse. So he monitored the visits closely, watching for signs. The kids were cautious too, especially Isabella, who clung to Lucas after every goodbye. One night, Mateus asked, "Why doesn't Mom stay with us?" Lucas knelt beside him and said, "Because she's working on getting better, and we're going to give her time." They hugged in silence. Lucas began to see himself not as a temporary protector, but as a permanent anchor in his children's lives. Every meal, every nightlight, every clean shirt was a reminder that love could be quiet and constant. The storm had not passed completely, but the foundation was holding, and Lucas was no longer afraid. Lucas knew he had built a fragile peace, one that required him to be strong every day, every hour. But beneath the routines and resilience, there was still pain. He missed being a husband. He missed having someone to share the weight. But he also knew that what they had before was not love, it was survival. Julia continued her treatment. Once a week, she would visit the children under supervision. Sometimes she was quiet and remorseful. Other times she seemed detached, like a guest in her own life. The kids were polite but distant, unsure how to interact with the woman who was once their mother and now felt like a stranger. Lucas watched closely. He wanted Julia to recover, for herself, for the children, but he never let hope cloud his judgment. His journal now included visitation reports, therapist notes, school updates. He was building not just a case, he was building a future. Mateus started drawing again. His pictures were brighter now. No more dark scribbles in corners or sad stick figures. Isabella sang around the house, making up songs about the stars. The baby had started walking, each step cheered on by his brother and sister like a miracle. Lucas never let himself cry in front of them. But sometimes, after they fell asleep, he would sit by the window and let a few tears fall. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming mix of exhaustion and gratitude. They were safe, they were healing, and he was holding them up, no matter what it cost. At work, things stabilized. A manager noticed his consistency and promoted him quietly, without making him prove more than he already had. For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt like someone saw his strength and didn't question it. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. The court date for the final custody hearing was set. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. It was the moment he had prepared for. The moment he would have to stand in front of a judge and fight not against Julia, but for his children. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Then he walked to the kitchen, poured juice for the kids, and smiled. The day was coming, and he would be ready. The day of the custody hearing arrived with a cloudy sky and a weight in Lucas's chest that no coffee could lift. He dressed the children early, kissed each one on the forehead, and left them with Helena, promising to return soon. In court, the benches were cold and the fluorescent lights too bright. Julia sat across from him, her hands clasped, eyes distant. She looked healthier, more composed, but the air around her still carried uncertainty. Lucas's lawyer spoke first, presenting months of notes, visitation records, therapist observations, school improvements, and testimonies from teachers and neighbors. Each page was a quiet scream of effort, proof that Lucas had never stopped fighting for his children. When Julia was asked to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice trembled as she admitted to the court the depth of her addiction and the harm it had caused. She said she loved her children more than anything, but that she knew love alone wasn't enough. The judge listened, took notes, and then paused before delivering the verdict. Lucas's heart thudded in his chest. Every second felt like a lifetime. Then, it came. Full custody was awarded to Lucas, with Julia allowed monitored visitation only if she remained in treatment and submitted regular reports. It was not a victory. It was a responsibility officially written into law. As they left the courtroom, Julia stopped him in the hallway. "I know I don't deserve it," she said, "but thank you for not turning them against me." Lucas nodded. They deserve to love their mother, but they also deserve peace. Back at home, he found the children playing in the yard. When they saw him, they ran to the gate. He crouched to hug them all at once, heart bursting. They didn't ask what happened. They just smiled, and that was enough. Weeks after the final ruling, life settled into a rhythm, the kind of rhythm Lucas had almost forgotten could exist. Mornings were early, but peaceful. Breakfasts filled with laughter and little messes. The kids began to feel safe enough to be children again. Lucas kept a structured routine. School, work, homework, dinner, story time. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. The children responded to the stability like flowers turning toward the sun. Isabella grew more confident. Mateus began asking big questions about the world. The baby now toddling around, followed Lucas with eyes full of joy. Julia, to her credit, stayed in her program. She attended every session, submitted regular test results, and remained clean. Lucas acknowledged that quietly, not for her, but for the kids. He wanted them to have hope, even if cautious. The visits continued, supervised and brief. Sometimes the kids came back quiet. Other times, they returned with drawings or stories about their mother. Lucas never judged. He simply listened and answered what he could. One day, Isabella left a drawing on the kitchen table. It showed 4 stick figures, herself, her brothers, and Lucas. Above them, a bright sun. Off to the side, another smaller figure with the words, "Mommy trying." Lucas stared at it for a long time, feeling something shift inside him. He didn't expect Julia to fully recover overnight, but he began to believe that maybe one day she could reclaim a part of herself, not as his wife, but as their mother. At work, his colleagues noticed the change. Lucas smiled more, spoke with calm assurance. He was no longer just surviving, he was building. He had become more than just a father. He had become a home. Lucas no longer counted the days since the custody decision. Time had become less about what they had been through, and more about what they were building together. Each child grew in their own way. Mateus joined a local soccer club, running across the field with a joy that made Lucas proud beyond words. Isabella started writing little poems and leaving them folded under Lucas's pillow. The baby, now a full toddler, spoke his first clear sentence, "Daddy, hug." Lucas's heart, once heavy with uncertainty, now beat with a steady rhythm of purpose. He still kept records, still stayed alert, but it no longer came from fear. It came from strength. Julia continued her supervised visits. Some were hopeful, some hard, but she kept attending, and that counted for something. One afternoon after a visit, Julia pulled Lucas aside. Her voice was softer than he remembered. "I know I lost so much, but I'm trying. I really am." Lucas nodded. "I see that, and they see it too." He wasn't offering forgiveness, but he was offering respect, not for who she had been, but for who she was working to become. That evening, Lucas sat on the porch, watching the sunset, all 3 children playing in the yard. He felt no need to speak, just watching them. Hearing their laughter was enough. He didn't feel heroic, he felt human. A man who had walked through chaos and found peace in the small, quiet victories of everyday life. And he knew their story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Months passed, the seasons changed, but Lucas's commitment remained constant. What once had been a survival routine now felt like life, full, meaningful, and his. Julia continued improving. She had setbacks, but never gave up entirely. She began attending group therapy sessions and even joined a support network for mothers in recovery. Lucas watched from a distance, not with judgment, but with cautious respect. One morning, an official letter arrived. It was a notification for the final custody review hearing. This time, it wasn't about temporary orders. This time, it was about permanence. Lucas sat with the kids that night and gently explained it. "The judge will decide if you stay living here with me forever." Mateus and Isabella looked at each other. Isabella asked, "But nothing will change, right?" Lucas smiled. "No, sweetheart, not if everything goes as it should." In court, Lucas stood firm, calm, steady. The social workers presented their reports, all in his favor. Julia, surprisingly, didn't contest. She said only, "They're better with him. I just want to keep getting better so one day they'll be proud of me too." When the judge granted Lucas full, permanent custody, the words echoed inside him like a soft bell ringing. It wasn't celebration he felt, it was release, the kind of quiet victory that brings tears to your eyes when no one's looking. Back home, he held the paper in his hand as the children played on the floor. He didn't announce it. He didn't need to. They were already living it. That night, as he tucked them into bed, Isabella whispered, "We're safe now, right?" Lucas kissed her forehead. "Yes, my love, you always will be." A year had passed since the judge gave Lucas full custody. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it became real, grounded, safe. Lucas no longer feared the knock at the door or the unknown of tomorrow. He had learned to live in the present, to cherish small joys, the way the kids laughed during dinner, how they ran to him after school, the feeling of peace in the home he built. Julia kept her promise. She stayed in treatment, took her tests, and followed every requirement. Visits remained supervised, but she never missed one. Over time, the children began to feel more at ease with her presence, slowly rebuilding a bond that had once been fractured. Beyond recognition, Lucas never spoke poorly of her. When the kids asked about the past, he answered gently, "Your mom got sick in a different kind of way, but she's trying hard to get better, and that matters." On weekends, they went to the park, baked cookies, painted walls with messy handprints. The house wasn't big. The salary wasn't high, but it was full of warmth and laughter and safety. One evening after everyone had gone to bed, Lucas stood by the window, watching the quiet street. He thought of everything they had been through, the sleepless nights, the courtrooms, the fear, and now this silence. The kind that didn't scream, but soothed. He wasn't looking for medals. He wasn't looking for applause. All he ever wanted was for his children to have a chance, a fair start, a safe place to grow. He had given them that, and maybe, just maybe, that made him a hero. If this story moved you, please leave a comment and share what touched you most. Your engagement helps this channel grow and allows us to keep bringing powerful and inspiring stories like this one. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next.